Chapter 5. Belonging. It was Sunday night, and Miss Winston sat next to Uncle Olaf at the table. It was her first meal with the Larsens. Aunt Inger and Mama had made a big dinner to welcome her. They'd even baked ginger cookies, just like at Christmas. "My parents have a lovely home on a harbor in Maine," Miss Winston said. "There's a small room on the top. It has windows on all four sides. When my father is at sea, we watch for his ship from that room. "What a fine room it must be," Anna said. She was the only one talking to Miss Winston. Uncle Olaf offered everyone more rabbit stew. Mama kept busy cutting and passing bread. "Why did you want to leave such a lovely home?" Anna asked. She was so excited to have Miss Winston there that she'd forgotten all about her supper. "Well, I certainly wasn't ready to marry and spend the rest of my life in a house," Miss Winston said. "I wanted to travel, to meet people, to have adventures. School teachers travel, so I decided to become a teacher. Maybe you will be a teacher when you grow up, Anna. You've been a good little teacher for Kirsten." Kirsten kept her eyes on her tin plate. With Miss Winston at the table, it seemed she'd forgotten all the English she'd ever learned. And what if Mama or Papa said something to Miss Winston about the poem Kirsten said she had memorized? Miss Winston would say Kirsten hadn't done it. Kirsten's head ached at the thought. Anna said, "Does your father sail on his ship every day?" Miss Winston smiled. "No, Anna, he isn't a fisherman. He has a big ship for carrying heavy cargo. He sails down the coast with a load of wool, then he sails back with a load of tobacco."
"I might want to be a sailor," Lars said. "Life is exciting on a ship."
Miss Winston looked at Lars. "Would you like to see my father's ship?"
"Ja," Lars said.
Then he read it and corrected himself.
"Yes, ma'am."
"Then after our meal, I'll show you a surprise," Miss Winston said.
"Eat, Anna," Uncle Olaf commanded. "You'll get thin if you don't pay attention to your dinner."
After everyone had finished eating, Miss Winston left the table. She climbed the ladder to the loft where she'd put her things. In a moment she was back with a bottle in her hand. She set the bottle on its side in the middle of the table. Everyone leaned forward to look. Inside the bottle was a model of a 3-mast ship. "This ship looks just like my father's," said Miss Winston. Kirsten drew in a sharp breath. It looks just like the eagle, too," she said. Miss Winston handed Kirsten the bottle so she could get a better look. Now she saw the ship closely. The ship we sailed on to America looked just like this one. It was called the Eagle. We sailed for 10 weeks. There were terrible storms. Everyone was sick. 6 people died on the ship, and sailors buried them at sea." She stopped. breathless, surprised at how many words she had just blurted out in English. Miss Winston pressed her forefinger to her lips and looked closely at Kirsten. You remember the ship clearly, don't you? Oh, yes. My friend Marta and I played on the deck, Kirsten said. Aha! Miss Winston exclaimed. You've given me an idea, Kirsten. In school the next day, Miss Winston came to Kirsten's side right after the first song. She handed Kirsten a piece of paper. Kirsten sat up straight, her heart thumping. Miss Winston never gave out paper. Here's another poem for you, Kirsten. I want you to memorize it instead of the first one I gave you, Miss Winston said. It's 4 lines from a long poem about a man who was a sailor all his life. When you spoke of your trip on the Eagle, I thought you might like these lines. Can you read them? Miss Winston's writing was as perfect as the writing in a book. Kirsten held the paper in both hands and read slowly but clearly. Swiftly, swiftly flew the ship, yet she sailed softly too. Sweetly, sweetly blew the breeze, on me alone it blew. As she read, Kirsten could almost feel the ocean wind on her face and taste the salt spray on her lips. And she missed Marta. You read that well, Kirsten. Do you think you could memorize these lines? Miss Winston asked. Kirsten nodded. She hoped that if she forgot any words, she could just imagine the eagle and the words would come back to her. I'll try, she said. Miss Winston bent down until her eyes were level with Kirsten. You will try, and you will succeed. Remember that, please. Then she went to open the door of the iron stove so Amos could put in more wood to heat the classroom. Because Kirsten and her family ate dinner at Uncle Olaf's house now, it was impossible for Kirsten to meet Singing Bird at their usual time in the evening, and there was never enough time in the morning. But on Wednesday, Kirsten managed to leave a tiny doll made of yarn for her friend after school. She found a piece of blue and white beadwork in its place. She thought it would make a beautiful headband for Sarah. Besides, the beads Singing Bird had drawn a full sun in the sand. She wanted Kirsten to come early the next morning to meet her. Sadly, Kirsten drew a cross through the drawing to tell Singing Bird she couldn't come. When would she be able to meet her friend again? On Friday, Kirsten whispered to Miss Winston that she was ready to recite her verse. Her chest ached and her stomach fluttered, but she wanted to recite before she forgot the poem. Miss Winston held up her hand and told everyone to be still. Kirsten Larson will now recite. Please come forward, Kirsten. Miss Winston stepped back so that Kirsten could stand in front of the stove, there where everyone would see her. Slowly, Kirsten walked to the center of the room. She tried to keep her chin high, just like Miss Winston did. She saw Anna smile and Lars grin. Then the room seemed to blur and fade, and all she heard was the thud of her heart. "You may recite now," Miss Winston said. "With feeling, please." "Now," Kirsten told herself. She imagined the sails of the Eagle creaking overhead. She imagined seagulls swooping and diving in the wind. She imagined Marta sitting by her side on the deck. Swiftly flew the ship, Kirsten said. She heard her own words clearly, as though someone else had spoken them. She kept her eyes closed and recited the poem without a single mistake. When she opened her eyes, the other students were smiling at her. Miss Winston touched her shoulder. "You recite very well, Kirsten. You recited with feeling. I'm proud of you," she said. Kirsten sat down in a daze. She had stood in front of everyone and recited her poem in English. She hadn't thought she could do it, but she had. And it hadn't been so hard after all. The next time would be easier. She was sure of it. She'd been scared, but she had done it. And now Miss Winston was proud of her. Anna nudged her and said, "Good for you." Lisbeth gave her a wink and said the same thing. "Now it's time for reading," Miss Winston said, but Kirsten was too dizzy to read. "May I fetch a water for our drink, Miss?" she asked Miss Winston. Yes, Kirsten, thank you. As you walk, don't forget to take deep breaths to draw fresh air into your lungs," Miss Winston said with a smile. Kirsten seized the bucket and her shawl. Outside, the air was cold. The light dusting of snow lay on the ground. When she reached the stream, Kirsten found a thin coat of ice on the water. She broke the ice easily with a stick and dipped her bucket into the stream. As she did, she heard a whistle of a meadowlark. When Kirsten looked up, she saw Singing Bird standing among the ice-coated cattails on the other side of the stream. "Hello!" "Come!" Singing Bird said. "But I can't come with you now," Kirsten said. "I have to go back to school." "Come!" Singing Bird repeated. She crossed the stream to the fallen log. "Maybe I could come after school," Kirsten said, though she wasn't sure how she could. "Come now!" Singing Bird repeated. "We go today!" Kirsten grasped her friend's cold hand. "Go? You're going? But why?" "No food," Singing Bird said. She pressed her hand to her stomach. "You don't have enough food?" Kirsten asked. She remembered the terrible pains in her stomach when Papa's crops had fallen in Sweden. She remembered how Peter had cried when there was no more bread to eat. "Bad hunting," Singing Bird explained. She held up her arms as though she was although she had shot an arrow from a bow. "We go find food." Kirsten remembered what Lisbeth and Anna had told her. The wild animals were leaving the land because the settlers were building farms, and Indians didn't have enough to eat. They were leaving to find more food. "Where will you go?" Kirsten asked when Pop when Papa couldn't grow enough food in Sweden. They had to go to America. But where could the Indians go to find better hunting? Singing Bird pointed to the west. "We go there for buffalo, for deer." Then she stroked the blonde braids which looped Kirsten's ears. "You come too," Singing Bird said. Kirsten looked at the snow-covered hill where a hawk circled in the sky. Then she looked at her friend's dark face, so close to her own. "Come, sister," Singing Bird said. She took Kirsten's hand. Kirsten remembered the warm teepee where Singing Bird lived. She imagined herself sleeping by Singing Bird's side under the buffalo hides. If she lived with Singing Bird, she would be free to roam the woods all day. Brave Elk would be good to her. He was the chief, and Kirsten would be his yellow-haired daughter. She and Singing Bird would always be together. But how could Kirsten leave her own parents, her brothers, her cousins? How could she leave the cabin under the pines? If she didn't come back home, Mama and Papa would be wild with worry. They would think she was lost. They might even think she'd been killed. And they might never give her permission to go. And they would never give her permission to go with Singing Bird. "No, I can't come with you," Kirsten said. "I want to come, but this is my home. I can't leave my home," Kirsten said. Singing Bird looked down sadly. She reached into the pouch she wore around her waist and took out her bone needle. She gave it to Kirsten. Kirsten closed her hand around the bone needle. "Will you come back, Singing Bird?" Singing Bird shook her head. "If dear come back," she said. "Oh, please do come back," Kirsten said. "I'll be here, right here. You can find me easily. Whistle for me by the stream. If dear come back," Singing Bird repeated. She touched Kirsten's braid one last time. Then she ran back to the fallen log and crossed the stream. She waved from the edge of the pine forest before she disappeared into the snow-covered trees. Kirsten watched her friend go. She imagined Singing Bird's tribe hungry, wandering, looking for food. Where would they go? How far would they have to travel before they could set up their village again? Now Kirsten understood that if the settlers made a home here, the Indians would have to find a new home. She filled her water bucket and trudged slowly back to the school. She pushed the door to the warm room. Miss Winston looked up from her place at the stove. "You've been gone a long time, Kirsten. I thought you'd found that ship in your poem and sailed back to Sweden." "No, ma'am," Kirsten said softly. She knew it was a joke, but she was too sad to smile. She slipped her hand into her pocket and touched the bone needle. How she would miss Singing Bird. Miss Winston smiled. Smiled, though. I felt I left something for you. I left something for you. It's in your reader, she said. Kirsten looked around the cozy room, crowded with busy children. She wasn't sure when this place had become her own, but she belonged here now. Her reader lay on the bench, waiting for her. Will you help me again? She asked Anna. Yes, Anna said gladly. She always did, and made room on the bench. And Kirsten sat down and opened her book. And that's the end of Kirsten Learns a Lesson. Thinking about how I felt the first time I read this book, which was a long time ago, and rereading it, I really have some new perspective on it. Because I remembered the story completely different than what it actually is. Like, I remembered, like, Kirsten, like, being really whiny, and I remembered Kirsten, like, skipping school to hang out with Singing Bird. But no, she never actually did skip school to hang out with Singing Bird. She just went before school and was almost late to school. So, yeah. And, I'm not really sure why, but for some reason, Kirsten has always been, like, my least favorite of the American Girl books. I don't know. It just didn't grab me in the same way as the others did. Like, if you know me really well, you know that I love the Molly books. I own the Molly doll. Like, the Molly books are the ones that got me interested in American Girl to begin with. The books, anyway. And then, second favorite would be Addie, because they're just so adventure-based and stuff. And then next would probably be either Felicity or Samantha, because, again, they're really epic. But yeah, one thing that I've noticed reading the newer American Girl books, well, not reading, listening to them on audiobook, listening to the new ones and then listening to the old ones, is the way they're written is very different. Like, what they do. Like, the older American Girl books, you'll notice that they brush off certain things that they wouldn't brush off in the new books. Like, in the older books like Kirsten, Felicity, and Samantha, Kirsten, she lies, and they kind of just brush it off like, she lied, whatever. And, like, in the Molly books, they do that too, but, like, I feel like it's the way they do it. Like, the way they did it in the Molly books, we could relate because we've all played a prank on somebody before. And we've all wanted to get back at somebody before. And that's how come we could relate to lying in that situation, because we've all wanted to get back at somebody before, and we've all wanted to put a prank on somebody before. But when it happens in the Kirsten book, you can't really relate to it, because, like, none of us, well, hopefully, if you're reading this book, you haven't skipped school just to, well, you haven't told your parents you were going to school early when you really were just going out to hang with your friend. I mean, personally, I can't relate to that, and I think that's maybe how come I don't like the Kirsten books that much. But yeah, one thing that I've noticed with the older American Girl books compared to the newer ones is they brush off things that if they were to write them in the newer books, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't brush them off. Like, the fact that Felicity technically steals Jiggy and I's horse, they don't have anything that's like that in the newer books. Like, in the newer books, the closest they've come to that is when Julie pet plant sits for her sister, and she accidentally hits it with a basketball and sends it crashing to its doom. But the plant was all right. I mean, that's incomparable. Like, the amount of like risks that they take in the newer ones compared to the older ones, it leads me to believe that the newer American Girl ones are better role models for girls than the older ones. Because like the older ones, they tend to do a lot of things that I wouldn't want girls nowadays to think that they could get away with. Like, I wouldn't want girls nowadays to think that it's okay for them to lie to their parents about where they are. And I wouldn't want girls nowadays to think it was okay to steal somebody else's horse or some other pet. And I wouldn't want girls today to think that it's okay to I just lost my train of thought. And I wouldn't want girls nowadays to think it's okay to secretly keep people in their attic. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I did not like those books. I did like those books. I'm just saying, I hope that if you're reading those books, you know that that was a different time, different things were legal, different things were happening then. And that those things necessarily aren't things that you should do nowadays. Now, the newer books, like Julie, Rebecca, and I'm trying to think of another newer character that I've read recently. Anyway, Julie, Rebecca, and I'm drawing a blank. I know there's another newer one that I've read the books of. Oh yeah, I read some of Cecile and Mary Grace's books too. But the difference between their books is they're less extreme, is what I want to say. Like, the Julie books, I don't think at any point Julie does anything that I would necessarily say I wouldn't want girls nowadays to do. Like, I don't think she ever, like, stole anything or, like, cheated or anything like that. All I can remember from her books that might be something that I wouldn't want girls nowadays to do is, that she doesn't really listen to her, the guy coach when he says there's no girls basketball team. But that's actually like the backbone of the whole series, and I like how she doesn't take a no for an answer, and it's a really great premise. Which is why I was totally peeved when I saw the trailer for the Julie movie, where the premise is Julie wants to be in a pageant. It's like, American Girl, did you even freaking read the books? Seriously, did you? Because, like, that is, like, completely polar opposite to Julie's personality in the books and her whole premise in the books. And this is turning into a rant on American Girl instead of my ideas on this book. So I'm gonna go back to coax myself back to this book instead of the whole of American Girl. Okay, so if I had to compare Kirsten to one of the newer American Girls, I would say she's kind of like Rebecca Rubin. The only difference is that Rebecca Rubin is a lot braver. Like, Rebecca Rubin does straight up things that I wish I could do nowadays. Like, she saved her cousin Anna from, like, being stuck at the top of a Ferris wheel. Like, 10 points, I wish I had the courage to do that. And she did that after, like, everyone had told her, oh, leave it to the grown-ups. Like, that's straight up, like, Nancy Drew guts. Status guts. Like, Rebecca Rubin, I really need to listen to those books again, because those are really good. Rebecca Rubin is one of my favorite of the newer characters. Let me just say that. And I'm going to stop talking now because if I keep ranting about American Girl, we're going to be here for a half hour. Trust me. Just trust me on this one. So, what are my final thoughts on this book? It's good, but I wouldn't say it's the best American Girl book ever. As far as the historical books go. If I had to decide on that, just trust me here, we'd be here all night. So I'm just going to say that it's a good book, but unless you're really wanting to read all the American Girl books of all the series, then I would just sort of skip Kirsten's books, because like I said, in my humble opinion, I think that they're the least exciting of the American Girl books, because there are just some points when I was reading them that I either got bored or I was just like, Kirsten, why did you freaking do that? They told you not to do that, and now look what you've done. You freaking burned down your house. It's yeah, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. I like the Kirsten books. If I'm in the mood to read the Kirsten books, then I'll read the Kirsten books, but they're not my favorite. Like I said, Molly and Addie are really the books that I love the most. And of course, Julie and Rebecca. They're great too. Also, I like Kirsten's, but also I like Kit Kittredge, but again, she's not exactly a great role model because she actually goes to jail in one of her books. Yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna shut up before this video gets 10 hours long. So, final thoughts on this book. It's pretty good. A read. You should check it out if you like Kirsten. If you don't like Kirsten, then don't check it out because it's kind of boring if you don't like Kirsten like I don't. So, I'm gonna stop here before this video gets 10 hours long and turns into a rant about American Girl. So, bye.